Lord just one more time. Amen. Because we know that we have to hold up that bloodstained banner. Amen. We know that we are in the Lord's army. So we're going to do all we can until we can't do it no more. Amen. There is a word, first of all, giving honor to the Lord, who is the head of my life, to my wife, amen, to our assistant pastor, Reverend Vaughn, Sister Vaughn, to Reverend Williams, amen, Sister Williams, to our deacons, amen, and our deacon wives, to our ushers, amen, to this music ministry, amen, that has helped us set the atmosphere on this morning, amen. It's just a blessing to be in the house of the Lord just one more time, amen. To all of our ushers who are standing on the door and sitting out in the congregation, it's good to know that you're here with us on this morning, amen. To all of our members that have zoomed in, amen, and have dialed in, it's good to know that you are with us as well, amen. I'm not going to tarry long this morning, but I do have a word from God to give you on this morning, amen. Amen. And so if I'm not animated as I normally be, just know, amen, something's going on with my throat, amen. I can't get into the doctor until the end of July, but I will get it all checked out, amen. And so, you know, but we love to be as powerful as we can be for the Lord, amen. We're not going to make any excuses to do what he would have us to do. We're going to do what God say do, amen. There is a word found in 1 Peter chapter 4. 1 Peter chapter 4. We'll begin our reading at verse number 12. 1 Peter chapter 4. We will begin our reading at verse 12. When you have it, say, I got it. If you don't have it, say, wait a minute. Amen. Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. But rejoice insofar as you share Christ's suffering, that ye may also rejoice and be glad when his glory is revealed. Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial which has come upon you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. But rejoice insofar as you share Christ's suffering, that ye may also rejoice and be glad when his glory is revealed. I simply want to talk about this morning how to make it through these suffering times.
All right.
How to make it through these suffering times. How to make it through these suffering times. We should not expect everything to be easy. I just said something. We should not expect everything to be easy. The truth is, problems will occur. God never said we would not have to deal with trials. Matter of fact, God said that we can take it to heart because he have overcame the world. But he never said that we would not have to experience some trials. Can I tell y'all this morning, my brothers and sisters, that the truth is, long as we are in this imperfect world, there will be some sickness. Long as we are in this imperfect world, there will be some trouble. Long as we are in this imperfect world, there will be some injustice. Long as we are in this perfect world, we can find ourselves dealing with some financial issues. Long as we are in this imperfect world, we might as well expect for some suffering. Yeah, because Jesus made it known. He says, take it to heart. He says, I have overcame the world. He said, in this world, he said, you will have trouble. So my brothers and sisters, why is it then that when trouble arises in our life, we act like it's something brand new? Why is it then every time I find myself having to deal with something, I want to ask the Lord, why, Lord, why, when he already told you that trouble's going to come your way? I'm glad y'all asked that question this morning, because Jesus said, take the heart now. He says, I have overcame the world. He says, and in this world, he said, you will have trouble. He said, but I want you to have peace. He said, so I told you that you will have trouble so that you can have peace. See, we don't have to allow what we see going on in the world to get in our spirit and trouble us, because Jesus already made known in his word that this stuff was going to happen. Amen, saints. So what is it then we need to do? Amen. I'm glad you asked. Because Jesus said, I want you to have peace. So in his word, he tells us that Jesus suffered that we might be set free. The whole reason, my brothers and sisters, Jesus suffered was so that I wouldn't have to allow the things that could hold me down. The whole reason why Jesus suffered was so that I could be free, that I might have liberty, that I could have peace, knowing that Jesus already died for it. Amen. And since Jesus died for it, I don't need to give my situation, I don't need to give my circumstance no power. All I need to do is put myself in remembrance that Jesus already took care of it. Am I talking to somebody this morning? Yeah, you've been dealing with these suffering times. And you've been letting them get the best of you. But I'm going to tell you this morning how to make it through. Amen. These suffering times. So he says in his word, God leads in his word, and he tells us that Jesus suffered that we might be set free. And just like Jesus suffered, we must do some suffering too. Tell somebody, we must suffer. No, I mean tell them, we must suffer. We got to go through something, amen. And that's our problem, my brothers and sisters. We want everything, but we don't want to go through nothing to get it. But the truth is, we got to go through some stuff to get what God will have us to have, amen. We got to suffer. He says, if any man gonna follow me, he must take up his cross. He said, first deny himself, take up his cross, and then follow me. He said, you got to deny yourself, because you got to understand that there's going to be some stuff you got to go through when you're on this side. God never said as Christians we wouldn't have to endure some stuff. God never said that as Christians we wouldn't have to face some circumstances in our life. God didn't tell us that every day was going to be a good day. He said we were going to have some good days, but yet we were going to to have some bad days. Yeah. But even in the midst of our bad days, my brothers and sisters, we still should be holding our head up and saying, God is good. Yeah, he says that Jesus suffered, that we might be set free. And just like Jesus suffered, we must understand that we too must do some suffering. Yeah. And I looked in Peter, 1 Peter chapter 3. Peter tells us, he says, you need to prepare yourself for suffering. I ain't got to the text yet, but this was in the previous chapter. Peter says, he says, you need to get ready for some suffering. And if anybody could instruct us on some suffering, it would be Peter. If anybody knew what they were talking about, it would be Peter. So Peter instructs us. He says, you need to prepare yourself. You need to prepare yourself for suffering. So Peter says to us, he says, when you suffer, he said to get ready for it, he says you need to remember that you're blessed. Yeah. Tell somebody I'm blessed. I'm blessed. See, even in the midst of my suffering, I'm blessed. Look, even in the midst of this pandemic that's been going on, you can be a witness and testify that you are blessed. You still had food on your table because you were blessed. You still had a roof over your head. That's because you was blessed. You still had your health and strength. That's because you are blessed. Even in the midst of all of this that was going on, Peter said when you're suffering, you still got to remember that you are blessed. I guess that's why the songwriter says, I won't complain. I had some good days, I had some bad days, but I won't complain because I know that even in my bad days, I'm still blessed. Here it is, my brothers and sisters. He says that we got to remember that we are blessed. And how many of y'all know that anytime that you make up your mind that you're going to live for God, anytime that you make up your mind that you're going to live for God and you're going to live godly, that's when the enemy is going to want to persecute you. Anytime you want to make up your mind and say, God, I want to do what's right, I want to do the things that you would have me to do, you can expect somebody going to be talking about you. I'm not talking to anybody this morning. You know that you're trying to do right by God, and you know that you're trying to do what God will have you to do, and they want to put their mouth on you. Can I tell you what was recorded in Matthew? Look what Matthew 5 and 11 says. God blesses us when people mock us. See, people don't understand how blessed we are. You know, they want to point the finger at us and why are you running out there to the church? And why are you doing this for the Lord? And don't you know the Lord? That's just the devil. But look what Matthew says. Matthew says that God blesses us when people mock us. And that when they persecute us and when they lie about us and say all sorts of evil things against us because we are his followers. But the Bible says we bless when they talk about us. Go ahead and talk about me. I don't care if you talk about me because I know that I'm blessed. I know that the Lord is looking out for me. I know that I ain't always been good. But when I made up my mind to serve him, I know that his favor is on my life. And that's why you should be happy today. When you know who you are and when you know who you belong to, it don't matter what they say. Because you blessed. Yeah, you know how I know it? Because in chapter 51 of Isaiah, I like the B clause of what Isaiah tells us in 51 and 7. He said, do not fear scorn from men. He said, don't worry about what they saying. They just mad, amen? You know people get mad when they see your favor. You know you don't have to do nothing to nobody, but because you blessed, people get mad because God blessing you. And there's some people that look at your blessing and look at your prosperity and say, well, why God doing it for them and ain't doing it for me? And all they got to do is just be glad in what God is doing for you, because what is for you is for you. And what God has for them Look what he says. So in Isaiah, he tells us, he said, don't worry about what the scornful men might say. Look what he says. I like what he said. He said, and don't be broken by their insults. See, you got to stop allowing what people say affect your worship. See, you got to stop allowing what people say about you impact how you feel about what you do for God.
You teach it, Pastor.
Too many people allow what people say affect their worship.
Teach it.
I can't shout for God because if I get too loud, I'm worried about what they might say. But if God did anything for you, you ought to be a sign. You ought to let somebody know that God is good to me, and I don't care who knows. You go ahead and talk what you want to talk.
You teach it, Pastor. You in the house.
See, when I walk down the halls of UAMS, I walk with my head up. And when they ask me, they said, what's good, preacher? I look up and say, God is good.
All right,
Huh? Why? Because I'm proud to know whose side I'm on. And if you know you're on the Lord's side, you ought to let somebody know what he's still able to do. Amen. So how is it, you know, and how is it that I'm going to get through these suffering times? Amen. I'm glad you asked because I'm working my way to it. See, when we don't listen to the insults, it's because of the next thing that Peter said we must do when we're preparing for the suffering time. See, Peter said if we're going to prepare, the first thing we need to remember is that we're blessed. Tell somebody I'm blessed. But then not only do we need to remember that we're blessed as we get ready for suffering times, Peter says that we need to put God first in our heart. He says you blessed, and he said you need to understand that you blessed only when you put God first. See, the reason why a lot of us can't get our blessings is because we want to put God on the back burner. See, we only want to break God out when we want a blessing. We only want to call on God when we need something. But if we make God first in our life, we won't never be in need. That's what I see. See, when we put God first in our life, we will never be in need. Because you know what he said? He said, if you seek ye first my kingdom and its righteousness, he said, I'll add all and every other thing that you might ever need or think of. But you got to remember that I need to be first. And when you learn how to put God first in your life, watch what happens. See, I'm a witness. When I put God first in my life, doors begin to open up for me. When I put God first in my life, those same doors that was being closed became automatic. I didn't have to even worry about opening because God was first in my life. I could just walk to the door and it will automatically open. And that's what God does with you when you put him first in your life. And it's time for us to let the world know that we got to put God first and get God off the backbone. So he says to us, he says that when we're preparing for these suffering times, we got to remember that we're blessed. How many y'all know that when you're going through, you still blessed? So why do, if you know that, why don't you believe it? See, we can say that we know, but only our belief will show us if we know. Because see, when I'm going through, I shouldn't have my head down. I still should have my head up. See, if I know that I'm blessed, even in the midst of my suffering, I still can walk with my head up, saying, my God got it. Okay, watch this. So he says that as we prepare, and I ain't got to the text, I know y'all ready. I'm going to get y'all to here. Just wait a minute. So he says to us, watch this. He says that in our preparing, first we must understand that we're blessed. Now we getting ready for the suffering. We ain't got there yet, but we're preparing for it. He said the first thing you need to understand that you're blessed. He said now after you understand that you're blessed, he said make sure that you put God first in your heart. Then he says this, that after we put God first, remember to always look to Jesus for an example. We put God first, and then we look to Jesus for our example. All Peter is telling us is that there is no way around suffering.
Man.
Watch this. You gonna suffer whether you on the Lord's side or not.
Right.
Now, do you want to suffer on the Lord's side,
Yeah.
or do you want to suffer without the Lord being with you? Now the choice is going to be up to you. But what you need to understand is that there is no way around suffering, that we all don't suffer. It just depends on who we're suffering with. Either we're going to suffer with the Lord on our side, or we're going to suffer with the devil on our side. But in the midst of suffering, we're going to suffer. Okay? So watch this. To be on the Lord's side, we're going to have to suffer. Peter wanted us to know that suffering is a part of God's plan. Tell somebody it's a part of God's plan. See, that's why he said all things work for the good of them that love me and has been called according to my purpose. Because God already knows that long as we in this imperfect world, there will be some suffering. He already knows that we're going to suffer whether we on his side or not, because suffering is all part of his plan. Okay, what you mean? I'm glad you asked. Am I telling you that God put suffering on you? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not telling you that God put sickness in your body that don't come from God. I'm not telling you that God attacks your finances that don't come from God. I'm not telling you that every evil thing in this world comes from God, because it don't. See, this world, my brothers and sisters, have a God. And the God of this world likes to create confusion. The God of this world is Satan. And Satan loves to attack you. Now, God is in ultimate control. God allows him to attack you because God knows that if he gave you everything you want, you wouldn't think you needed him. So God says, I gotta allow you to go through some stuff, not because I don't know how strong you are, but I allow you to go through some stuff so you will know how strong you are. See, if I got some witnesses in here that can testify that I was only able to get through my suffering time when I realized I could handle what God was allowing being put on me. If Job was here, he'll say it. Amen. And I'm here, so I'll tell you. You're going to only make it when you learn how to understand that God is allowing you to suffer for a reason. Okay, watch this. So watch this. I'm getting ready. So Peter wants us to know that suffering is a part of God's plan. That God will take our suffering and use it for our good. So now I'm in the text. Here it is in our text. I learned how to make it through these suffering times. When I began to look in this 4th chapter, amen, I done moved from chapter 3 and now I'm in chapter 4. Peter, he tells us how to make it through these suffering times. The first thing that Peter tells us is that we must expect to suffer. Peter says we must expect to suffer. Look what he says. He says, don't think that it is strange, that something strange has happened to you. Peter said, don't think that it's unusual when you find yourself going through some situations. Am I talking to anybody? He says, don't think that it's strange. Matter of fact, if you go to 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 9, you'll hear him say that the same thing that is happening to you is also happening to others. So what Peter is saying is, you need to understand that you're not in this by yourself. You need to understand that you're not the only one that is dealing with some suffering.
Well,
Others are dealing with some suffering too. So Peter says that if you're going to make it through it, the first thing you need to do is to expect to suffer. Tell somebody, I got to expect it.
I got to respect it.
So, let's look how Jesus makes it plain. I'm getting ready to get out of here. Look how Jesus makes it plain. Jesus makes it plain to us in John chapter 15. John chapter 15, verse 18 through 21. John chapter 15, verses 18 through 21. Look what he says. If the world hates you, know that it has hated me before it hated you.
All right, all right.
He says, if the world hates you, he said, know that it hated me before it hated you. Y'all with me?
Yeah.
He said, if you were of the world would love you as his own. But because you are not of the world, and that's why the enemy comes after you. The enemy is coming after you because you don't belong to his word. And he knows that you are on the Lord's side. And so he wants to wreak havoc in your life so that you will turn your back on God and come join in his world. But you got to learn how to tell the enemy, I don't care what you do, I'm staying with the Lord. I don't care if I'm in hell, I'm staying with the Lord. Because I know that wherever the Lord is, that I'm going to be all right. So he says, if you were in the world, that the world, they would love on you. Why? Because misery loves company. Y'all know the truth that if I'm doing bad and you doing bad, we doing bad together. Amen? But it's only until I start doing good and you still doing bad, now you want to hate on me. But if you learn how to turn that thing around, when God blesses me, know that he's going to bless you. Because if God can do it for me, that means he can do it for you. And so when he blessed me, we ought to shout together. We ought to say, girl, you've been blessed. We ought to say, boy, you've been blessed. We ought to say, God is still in the blessed business. Amen. So he says to us that not only if we was in the world that the world would love us, but because we're not in the world, that's why the world hates us. Amen. And so he goes on and he tells us this. He said, but I choose you out of the world. Therefore, the world hates you. He said, when I chose you. See, y'all thought y'all chose God, didn't you? See, God said, no, I chose you. I chose you from day one. I already knew that you was coming back home because I had already chosen you. I already knew that you was on my side because I chose you. I knew while you was in the womb that one day that you was going to work for me. I knew that you was going to serve me, that you was going to go out into the hedges and highways and compel men to come unto me because I told you a long time ago. And that's why, my brothers and sisters, you can't run, you can't hide, you got to do what God say do.
Thank you, Lord.
Because he chose you.
Thank you for choosing me, Lord. Thank you. Thank you.
Why, my brothers and sisters?
Thank you.
You know that's true. Can I just call Brother Joel one more time? Can I call him just one more time? Do y'all remember the story about Brother Joel? What happened? God said, have you tried? Hello, sorry. God said, have you tried? My servant Job. God chose him. And when you're going through some stuff, know that God has chosen you, and that whatever God is allowing you to go through, Keep believing.
Lord, thank you, Lord.
Look what he says. He says, remember the word that I said to you. He said, a servant is not greater than his master. And that's why I told y'all this morning that we're going to suffer because the Lord suffered. But that's okay. That's how he able to relate to us because he already been there and done that. Amen. And so since we are his servants and we're not greater than the master, they persecuted him, they're going to persecute us. But are you willing, my brothers and sisters, to take the ridicule from them that is going to talk bad about it? Be willing to take it because the Bible clearly tells us that we are blessed. We're blessed when men talk about us. We're blessed when men want to convince us to give up on God. We're blessed long as we keep holding on.
Thank you, Lord.
He says if they kept my word, they will also keep yours. But all these things they will do to you on account of my name, because they do not know him who sent me. He said the stuff that you're dealing with is all because they don't know God. See, people can say they know God, but their actions reveal that they know God. And he says you need to understand that you're going to be ridiculed because they don't know God. And sometimes we link up with people who say they know God, but in the midst of our suffering, we realize that they don't know God like we thought they know God. And that's why I always tell you that you need to surround yourself with people who know God. Because in this world we don't suffer. And when the enemy comes knocking at my door, I need those who are on my side not to beat me down, but to help me up. I need those who are on my side to tell me that you know what, this is something that God has allowed, but you're going to make it through. Not say, well, you done did something. Because the Bible is clearly telling us that our suffering has nothing to do with our sin. Yeah, sometimes we suffer because of sin. But our suffering is not always due to sin. That sometimes we suffer because it's all a part of his plan. Now, my brothers and sisters, watch this. I know y'all ready, but this is the blessing in the suffering. Look what he said. They are to try our faith. See, our faith has to be tried. God allows our faith to be tested so that it will make us spiritually strong. See, we have to get our faith worked on so that we can be spiritually strong. We know that faith comes by hearing, and hearing comes by the word of God. But how many of y'all know that the more you work out, the stronger you get? So God allows these circumstances to come in the believer life to work him out. So that you can get strong. That way, when something truly comes up on you, you don't allow it to take you out because you are spiritually strong. Now, what he does is he tests our faith to show us that we can truly handle it. Tell somebody, I can handle it. No matter what I'm going through, I can handle it. You know why I can handle it? Because I'm relying on God's strength. Amen. I know that I can handle it, not on my own, but because I'm trusting and believing in God. I got faith that all things are possible with him. Yeah. So the good news is he is going to bless us after the test. Tell somebody that even though I may be suffering, God is going to bless me afterwards.
All right now.
Tell somebody that. Tell somebody that. Even though
Even though
I'm suffering,
I'm suffering,
God is going to bless me
God is going to bless me
afterwards.
afterwards.
First
Yeah,
Peter.
it's needed, Lord.
1 Peter 5 and 10, look what he says. After we have suffered for a little while. Y'all get it? After we have suffered for a little while, the God of all grace, who has called you to his eternal glory in Christ. Watch this. This is what I like. After we done suffered. That's why no matter what we go through down here, y'all still ain't with me. No matter what we go through down here,
Yeah.
that we got another place
All right now.
that is not made by man's hand. And look what he says. He says that the God of all grace, not some grace, but all grace, who has called us to his eternal glory in Christ Jesus, will himself, 1, restore us, 2, confirm, 3, strengthen, and then establish us. Ain't that good news? To know that after all this suffering I've been through,
Yeah.
that one day God is going to restore me.
One day.
He's going to confirm it. He's going to strengthen me. And he's going to establish me. All when this suffering is over. Amen. My brothers and sisters, I'm getting ready to get out of here. But what I'm trying to tell you is that if you're going to make it through these suffering times, number 1, you need to expect to suffer.
Yeah.
Number 2 is, if you're going to make it through these suffering times, you need to understand that God is going to bless us. We should rejoice in our suffering because of what suffering does. Tell somebody we should rejoice in our suffering.
We should rejoice in our
I know that sounds crazy, doesn't it? Tell the truth, when you hear it, it don't sound right, do it? The rejoice in what I'm going through.
Yeah.
It don't sound right. I know it don't sound right to you.
Yeah.
But you got to understand that God's way of thinking
It's not ours.
is not our way of thinking. So when I tell you to rejoice, I'm not telling you from your perspective.
Yeah.
I'm telling you what the Word of God says.
Come on, Pastor.
If you look in Peter, that's what he's saying. He said, in order to make it through, amen, these suffering times,
Yeah.
he said, you need to rejoice in what you're going through. Huh? Is it anybody in here can tell the truth about being a witness that when I learned how to rejoice in whatever circumstance I was in, I still realized that God was blessing me? When I didn't allow my situation to get me down, but I kept my head up, I kept a smile on my face, and I said, to God be the glory. I did what Job said, where the Lord gave it, and the Lord took it away. When I started looking at things like it don't really belong to me, everything that I have, God gave it to me. So if somebody came in and they vandalized something, then I was still all right because I know that if God gave it to me one time, He'll give it to me another time. And when I learned how to just rejoice in the situation that I was in, everything began to be all right. Because when we don't learn how to rejoice and praise God for what we're going through, then the enemy gets the best of us. I shared the story with y'all on yesterday. I remember when the pandemic first hit. Amen. Instead of rejoicing in the pandemic, I let the pandemic affect how I thought. Amen. Every time something happened, amen, if you talked around me, I said, oh Lord, I'm going to get the corona. Hello, somebody. I mean, if you sneezed around me, I said, oh Lord, they're going to give me the corona. I was so focused in on the corona that I forgot that God was still in charge of whatever was going on. Amen. I was so busy giving corona my attention that I forgot that if I just kept my mind staying on the Lord, that He would give me peace. And if God tell the truth in here today, some of you were the he said that if we're going to make it through these suffering times,
Yeah.
he said that we must rejoice in our suffering. Tell somebody to rejoice in it. James said it like this. He said, when you find yourself in direct temptation, he said, count it all joy. See, why is that? I'm glad y'all asked. See, when you suffering,
Yeah.
that means God ain't through with you. See, when you going through,
Yes, sir.
that means God is just getting ready to do something in your life.
Yeah.
And see, I want to be on the Lord's side. And I'm glad that he allowed some stuff to come and attack me. Because the more I get attacked, the stronger I get. And I get cocky in the Lord. I ain't going to tell y'all I don't. Because when that devil comes mess with me, because I know that my Father can do all things except fail, I tell the devil, this ain't what you want. This ain't what you want. And that's what you got to learn how to do. Because he'll come in your home. And when he come in your home, you better tell him, this ain't what you want. When he come on your job, you better tell him, this ain't what you want. Because I'm on the Lord's side. And I'm going to rejoice in whatever you bring. Bring it on because I can take it.
Yeah.
Watch this. I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
Paul makes it plain to us in Romans. Paul makes it plain to us in Romans chapter 5. Paul says it like this. Paul tells us why we should be rejoicing. Amen. He says, but rejoice in your suffering, knowing that suffering produces endurance. How many of y'all know that it was only until God allowed you to suffer that you know you could go a little further?
Yeah.
That's what suffering do, don't it?
Yeah.
See, Mama and them knew that, didn't they?
Yes, it is.
Y'all know I got to talk about Mama and them.
Yeah.
Because Mama and them faith was different than the faith of today.
Yeah.
See, Mama and them, when they began to suffer, Mama and them did not get worried. Mama and them would walk around with their head up,
Yeah.
and they would do one of them old spiritual hymns.
Yeah.
Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me.
Yeah.
Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. Y'all know it, though. Why? Because they knew that in their suffering, God was producing endurance, and that they were going to be able to hold out a little longer because he was walking with them. And ain't that true that you can go a little further when you know that the Lord is walking with you? You can hold your head up because you know that God is walking with you. He says not only does it produce endurance, but he says endurance produces character.
Well,
See, Mama them said, baby, you got to go through something.
yeah.
Ain't that how they would talk to you, think?
Yeah.
They said, well, if the Lord never let you go through nothing, how you know you can stand for something? Huh?
Yeah.
So God knows that our endurance is going to produce our character. Amen. That's going to make us feel better when we know that we can hold out and that we can go a little further.
Yeah.
Then our character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. God done gave us a gift, and that gift is his Spirit. And the Spirit goes with us. The Spirit guides us. And the Spirit will lead us to where God would have us to be. Point number 3, and I'm gone. To make it through this suffering time, we have to take inventory of our trip. if you continue to look in our text, Peter says, make sure that your suffering is for the right reason. Amen.
Amen.
He says, because if your suffering is for the wrong reasons, there will be consequences. And how many of y'all know that long as you suffering for the Lord, long as you allow your suffering to be about God,
Amen.
that God said, if you suffer with me, you shall reign with me.
Yes, yes.
But we have to take inventory of our trip because of the simple fact that there are two destinations and there are two roads. And depending on what road you're traveling on is where your trip will end up.
All right now.
And so if you're on the wrong road,
Amen.
then you need to understand that the wrong road is the road which is broad and that it leads to destruction.
Amen.
And at the end of the road, there shall be destruction. Don't let nobody fool you talking about when you dead, you done. Don't let nobody fool you.
Yeah.
You want to choose the narrow gate and the narrow road because that is the road that leads to life.
All right, all right.
And so when we leave this body and when we leave this world, we need to understand that there is a life to come. Either you're going to be able to spend life eternity with the Lord, or you're going to spend life in eternal damnation. But the truth is that the choice is yours.
Yes.
And so if you don't know the Lord, and if you're on that road that is leading to destruction, tell somebody it's time to get off the road. Yeah, it's time to get on that road that leads to life. Not only do we need to take inventory of our trip, is we going to make it through these suffering times. But Peter said that if we was going to make it through these suffering times, that we had to learn how to commit ourselves to God. Peter says in verse 19 that we need to learn how to commit ourselves unto the Lord. And what I like about it, he says this, therefore, let those who are suffering according to God's will to entrust their souls to a faithful Creator while doing good. And so Peter now is telling us that if we're going to make it through these suffering times, Peter tells us, my brothers and sisters, that the first thing we need to do to make it through the suffering times is expect to suffer. Peter tells us that the next thing we need to do if we're going to make it through these suffering times is to rejoice in our suffering. Peter tells us that if we're going to make it through these suffering times, we need to take inventory of our trip. But the last thing Peter writes to us and tells us that if we're going to make it through our suffering times, that we need to commit ourselves unto the Lord. He tells us that we need to commit ourselves to God. Can I tell y'all this morning that if you're looking to commit yourself to the Lord, that you commit yourself to God by spending some time with Him. That if you're going to commit yourself to God, that you need to spend some time with God through His Word. That if you're going to commit yourself to the Lord, that you need to spend some time in His Word, but also spend some time in prayer. Because how many of y'all know that it was prayer that changed your situation around? The Bible said that it was the prayers of the righteous that prevailed much. Can I tell y'all that I'm reminded that when Jesus was up on the cross, I heard Him say a prayer. Y'all still don't hear me. Who was the righteous? It was Jesus. Who had did nothing? It was Jesus. Who they talked about? Who they called? Everything but a child of God. It was Jesus. But Jesus, He was the Word. And He spent a little time with the Father. He said, they don't know me because they don't know my Father. And on that cross, I heard Him say, He said a prayer. And the prayer was, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they do. Can I tell somebody that if you don't commit yourself to the Lord, you gotta do it by spending some time with Him. You gotta do it by spending some time in the Word. You gotta do it by spending some time in prayer. But not only that, you gotta always look to do good. Tell somebody that you overcome evil by doing good. No matter what the world do to you, don't give an eye for an eye. You know how you can make somebody mad when they talk about you. You can pray for them. That's gonna make them mad. When they say something that you don't like, you just say, I'm gonna pray for you. If you rely on doing good, that will make them mad. Now, I'm leaving, but can I tell y'all the reason why you should commit yourself to the Lord? Peter said that you should commit yourself to God because He is faithful. He's a faithful creator. He made you. He is Alpha and Omega. He's the beginning and the end. But I like what Chronicles tell me. Second Chronicles in the 16th chapter, it says something like this: that God's eyes is on them. He goes all through the earth, and He's looking to strengthen those whose heart is fully committed to the Lord. Can I tell y'all this morning that God will give us what we need when we commit to Him? He will give us what we need when we commit to Him. He wants us to commit because He will strengthen us. He wants us to commit so He can create in us what He needs out of us. Tell somebody that I'm going to commit to the Lord today. I'm going to do His will. I know right now it's not my will, but the Lord's will needs to be done. We got to go in the hedges and the highways, and we got to tell men that God see Him through these suffering times. If they commit to Him, I'm so glad that I made up my suffering times.